Hi, I'm meteorologist Pete Mangione, and welcome to another edition of Sonoran Sky Live. Today we're going to be talking about concierge meteorology. All right, so what does this mean? Imagine there is a wedding planned for late in the afternoon, but also think about the fact that there could be a thunderstorm in the forecast. And what if that thunderstorm is forecast to hit maybe 2 miles away, but not exactly at this location? Do you postpone it? Do you ask hundreds of people to move? Do you have to pull up the tents and plan for another day? Obviously, that decision would be very expensive. These are all very critical decisions that have to be made when planning events, especially high-profile events, weddings, concerts, and things like that. So I want to bring in our first guest. His name is Andrew Leavitt. He is from Ironic. Andrew, thanks so much for being on Sonoran Sky Live.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, a pleasure to be here and a good chance to talk about the weather. It's one of those times that it's very rare we get a chance to educate the world about concierge meteorology.
So let's talk about what exactly your role is at Ironic and how you got into this business.
So my role is I am the CEO, founder. We started originally, I came from the concert industry where I was a event producer for a company called AEG Presents. And over my time with AEG, worked with meteorologists for 10 plus years on large scale festivals. And for every festival and concert out there, for the most part, you have a meteorologist on call when you're doing the event. And during the pandemic, we all ended up being out of work for a period of time. And I read a story about how weddings were still allowed to happen. They just had to be outside. So I called up the meteorologist and said, hey, for a minute, do y'all want to go work on some weddings? And we started Ironic, little play on the Alanis Morissette song, as a part-time job to cover ourselves during the pandemic. And we're now in our 5th year and do over 100 plus weddings and private events a year, working with some of the best planners around the world.
It's funny you mention Alanis Morissette. Doesn't she have a song that mentions rain?
Rain on Your Wedding Day is the chorus of that song. I won't sing it for you, but that is how we came up with the name Ironic.
Yeah, I was going to try to trick you into singing there, Andrew. Looked
No,
like
no, I won't fall for that.
Okay, so talk about, I know that you're not allowed to talk about all the events you've worked on, but can you tell me a couple of examples of big events that you've forecasted for?
Yeah, a lot of the events we work on, obviously, they fall into some of the times we can't talk about them due to just contracts and NDAs. But we do get some events that are very publicly seen. So the Kansas City Chiefs, their Super Bowl ring ceremony was one in particular that was happening. And that was forecasted. It was starting with almost a 2-week build. So as this is building, we started tracking the weather, making sure it was going to be in a tent outside. That they were going to be okay since it was in the middle of tornado season. And it got to the point where we were actually tracking for the week ahead that there was still potential risk. Got to the point that my business partner, meteorologist Jack Sillen, decided that it was a good idea to actually fly to Manhattan, Kansas to try to go chase what potentially could turn into a tornado with his father for fun. Well, the rest of us were all watching to make sure that the event was going to be safe. But it was good because we had him on the ground, boots on the ground, to be able to see that the storms never developed the way they could have. So that's sort of where we get called in, is when there's large scale events publicly seen, to make sure that we're tracking what is happening hundreds of miles away and then what's happening on site a week later. So we start a week out. Normally, if it's a private event, by Tuesday or Wednesday, we're making the tent call, the rain plan call. And then as we get closer to the week, we really feel confident in the forecast. And that's where we really start to pull in, cool, this is the plan we're going to go with, and this is how we're going to move forward. So, yeah.
And do you have like spreadsheets? Because I'm just thinking about the stress of the financial implications. Like, hey, if you tell hundreds or thousands of people, hey, we've got to move this event or cancel the event, I mean, that could be thousands of dollars of loss, right? Because you've got to maybe pull up a tent structure or move the date. I mean, it just seems very, very costly.
So it's a mixture. I would say that I wish I could have a spreadsheet that said, if this, then this happens. But a lot of times what happens is we could start off with, okay, we know it's going to be a little bit windy. We're going to need a tent with sidewalls. Then all of a sudden it's looking like 5 days out. Okay, it looks like we're going to need flooring. Okay, well, the wind is actually going to bring in some cold air as well. Now we need to bring in HVAC for the tent and the structure. So things start adding up very quickly. And a lot of people have been in the situation where you start planning an event, and especially a wedding, and before you know it, the bills increase over and over. So for us, we like to just try to do a little bit of risk mitigation and then kind of help lower the budget if possible by making sure that we can give all the warnings and all the information ahead of time so the planning team can make a decision on how to best approach it. And especially with rain, and we talk about this with many events, if we know that it's going to rain, say on Wednesday, and the plan is to build the tent on Thursday, that means that there's a forklift that would be driving over wet grass. So people don't think about the fact that just the damage to a wedding venue lawn or a public space can add up really quickly. So if we can shift the build to Tuesday, keep the ground dry, work on the underneath the tent throughout the days leading in, it just changes things and drastically changes the budgets in the long run.
You sent us a few pictures, so the one behind me, Mario, I'm not sure if we can take this full screen. It looks like it's a beautifully put together tent. You have the guests outside. Do you know specifically what this event was, or this is just kind of an example of things that you do?
No, this is Amelia Island. This was 2024. It's actually a group of event planners that throw events. So like a conference, but I would say more like a multi-million-dollar event that we all get to go and enjoy and sort of see how it's all built out. So this was actually a tent for a lunch. The night before, there was a drone show using the same tent as the welcome party. And we were actually tracking the weather for the drone show. There was some light rain before this happened. We were able to get and have umbrellas out there for everyone who wanted to go stand outside the tent, watch the drone shows. And then we had a team tracking the wind speed to make sure the drones could take off and work safely.
And you mentioned tents, and so I'm looking at how this tent is secured. And if there are gusty winds in the forecast, do you sometimes say, okay, we can still do the event, but we've got to weight these things down. We've got to stake these things down a little bit more?
Correct. It's actually incredible. The structural engineering that goes into the tents, it makes our jobs a lot easier because it is all laid out for us. For most tents, if you have 70-mile-an-hour winds, that means that this is the plan of action. This is a sailcloth tent, but if it was a metal structure, you can go up to 90. We actually had an event up in the Hamptons earlier this past summer where we watched basically a major storm roll in for multiple days. And we were able to make sure that the structure was built safely, correctly on site, and then cancel our loadout, wait 48 hours for the storm to calm down. When the storm started to calm down, then everyone went back in and started to deconstruct the structure. But these are full construction builds with general contractors licenses required and insurance and all of the safety and regulations sort of you need to make sure that nothing bad can happen. And this is really based on a lot of what we saw in the concert industry, where years ago there was a few stage collapse and to a point where the industry was becoming more dangerous. A group called the Event Safety Alliance really went forward and sort of led the charge on how to make live events more safe for everyone involved.
All right, I want to pull up. This is not a picture that you sent me, but you mentioned it a couple days ago. I thought this was so interesting. We've all been to weddings and events, especially weddings, I think, and you've got the high heels sinking into the grass, right? How do you forecast for that? It sounds like this is an issue that you actually do try to track.
We get some weird requests. High heels in the grass. We once were asked the question on how to figure out, I believe it was the Beverly Hills Country Club, how much water they could have because they were only expecting light rain. Beverly Hills this time, it was a couple years ago, was expecting basically scattered showers, light drizzles. And the question was, at what point are heels going to sink into the grass? No one's prepared for this out there. So we actually worked with the groundskeeping crew, ran sprinklers on parts of the golf course to figure out and get as much rain as we thought it would be projected to hit the grass, and then tested it with some high heels. Obviously, I assume different heels, different issues. But we do get some weird requests. We've gotten the request for humidity and the structural integrity of cakes versus fondant versus buttercream.
Okay, so I don't know what kind of cake this is. I'm just pulling up a picture right now. So say that again. I think this is really, really interesting. So you sometimes, it's not just a safety issue for people. Sometimes it's a concern for how the cake is going to hold up in the weather.
Very, very true. I think we've all probably seen, or at least if you're living on the wedding TikTok world, social media world, videos of the cake beautifully designed, cost thousands to have, and then all of a sudden starts kind of melting into itself on a hot summer day. That is most likely a buttercream versus a fondant, which holds its structure better. Things I definitely did not know when I was producing concerts. But those are the questions that we get asked, and it's really, we found that from everything from the gram weight of material for the suit that someone is wearing to the material that a wedding dress is made out of. There's tons of different components that the weather plays into. And for us, we talk about climatology versus meteorology, or saying climate is your personality, the weather is your mood. And for us, when we look at the climate, we can look at that 2 years in advance and then make some real clear outlines for where you should get married, what time it should be, what time of year, what it will be like, and what the kind of personality of the venue would be. And then the design phase kicks in, and those factors all play into that. Versus meteorology, when we get down to the week of, we're tracking live, and we have a team of meteorologists. They work 24/7, and we're zoned in just specifically to the venue. So as you mentioned earlier, if the rain is 2 miles away, we've had some events. I think I sent you a photo of one in a cave where a wedding, or it was a wedding industry event happening inside of a cave. And sure enough, we had rain basically a mile away on the other side of the cave, so not the opening side. But if that had shifted to the other side, it could have been a little bit of a situation in a low-lying area.
And I'm gonna you sent us a bunch of cool pictures. Is this picture that you sent me ring a bell at all? I'm not sure you can see it. It looks like
is,
go
New
ahead.
York City. New York City. That's the 620 loft. That is out. When I say outside, you're outside, but you're in the middle of Manhattan. There is no, I would say, coverage that you could ever want to put up there, because you'd be blocking the view of the church, blocking the view of the skyline. But that was an event we did where everything worked out on this one. So that was a good photo to send over. But yeah, it's really about just trying to make sure that the designs that will happen, and we have another event actually coming up there in a couple of weeks, make sure that the designs match the proposed forecast, and then how to figure out how to play into that.
Do you find this work stressful? Because, I was kind of forced into this one time. This is probably about 15 years ago. My friend was getting married in the mountains of Colorado, and even though it was August, it started snowing, and they were trying to decide, can we do the ceremony outside? Will the snow stop, or are we going to have to go under the tent? And I made the call. I'm like, we got to go in the tent, because, I was looking at the radar. I don't think the snow is going to stop. And what ended up happening is it kind of stopped halfway in between the ceremony. So people were, I guess, somewhat satisfied with my decision. But that is big time pressure. You've got the bride and the groom. They don't want their day ruined. And I'm trying to, sit there and make a snow forecast on the fly.
I think I would say it is stressful in terms of wanting everything to be perfect. On the days that we have great weather, it's the most relaxing job in the world, and I love it. But the thing that I think, and you touched on this, is with the couple, at the end of the day, it's their wedding, and everyone is still happy. So even if it's finding a 45-minute pocket to jump outside when it isn't raining, take photos, be with your family, and also hopefully get the ceremony in, that is what means the world to them. Versus if the cocktail hour has to move inside for an extra 30 minutes because there's some light drizzles. So thankfully, in weddings and social events, there is this real connection to people want to make sure it's a safe environment for their family. It's the people they love the most in the world they've invited. And because of that, normally the right calls are made to make sure that everyone's safe. And that's really the best part of the job. Very different than the concert industry, where concerts, you're forecasting for 40,000 people and have to make sure that everyone's safe. They're paid attendees, and there's a duty of care that really comes on a corporate side of that. And that one feels a little bit more stressful because the fans don't always understand why a storm 4 hours away is an issue. When we look at it when we're producing, and we know that the event's going to run for another 6 hours, that means the last 2 hours of the night are going to be extremely unsafe. And that's where you have lightning strikes within 8 miles, high winds, hail, potential for real risks.
Of course.
So
Andrew, sorry to cut you off. Do you have a few minutes to hang out? We've got to take a quick break. Will you have a few minutes to join us when we come back from break?
Of course. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break and be right back. Welcome back to Sonoran Sky Live. Let's continue our conversation with Andrew Leavitt. We've been talking about forecasting for high-profile events, weddings, concerts, things like that. So, Andrew, a couple of additional questions we wanted to ask you, and my producer Katie had a good couple of topics to get to. We talked about humidity and the wedding cakes. What about humidity and hair? I mean, you know, hair is important. Looks like this guy's got some nice hair. Do you ever get questions about that?
I thought it would be a good idea as a bald man to research hair. And after thousands of dollars spent in consulting hours with tons of wedding stylists and different people, I realized I have no business talking about humidity and hair. So the stylists that we work with, have filled me in on every type of product and style option that you can go with. But what we realized was humidity isn't the real one that kills everything or ruins the day, I should say. It turns it into wind speed. And the reason for that is because the goal is to always keep the timeline running as easy and on schedule as possible. But what we've noticed is that when planners and couples don't know what the wind speed will be ahead of time, a lot of times there's an idea to have their hair down. And if you're doing that, but then we find out that we have 15 to 25 mile an hour sustained winds and gusts up to 35, hair down is going to ruin every photo and not be what you want for the day. So then it requires someone picking a new style in the moment and sort of flipping through Pinterest boards to find what is going to work for them on site. And that is what I found out the biggest thing to push a schedule back by about 45 minutes is someone in the bridal party or someone on site that is making a hair decision on the wedding day. So we always try to make sure that everyone knows the wind speeds leading into this and they can send that information down to everyone so there's a backup hairstyle in their pocket in case it gets a little windy on site. That
is so important. And finally, before we go, have you ever worked on any weddings or events in the desert Southwest in Arizona, any location like that?
We have. We've done things at Dove Mountain and had some great events there. Very cold at night. Obviously, the desert, as you know, gets pretty chilly. And it actually dropped down to a photo, and I'm thankful I did not share it with you, but I was sitting outside and actually had to wrap myself in a blanket all the way around my head just to handle it. But light drizzles and easy, but I will say the desert night is one that will, as someone that lives in Louisiana and New Orleans, we're not used to dry, cold weather like that.
Andrew, thanks so much for being on Sonoran Sky Live. I really enjoyed this conversation, and good luck with the rest of your forecasts and your events.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me. Enjoy yourself.
Goodbye. Absolutely. All right, we will take another short break and be right back with our second guest. Welcome back to Sonoran Sky Live. We are continuing our conversation about forecasting for outdoor events like weddings, concerts, outdoor parties. Obviously, weather plays a huge role in this because if bad weather is in the forecast, how do you make the decision whether to postpone, cancel, or keep proceeding on? So we're going to go now to Lauren Bircher from Culinary. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us. Did I get the last name right with the pronunciation?
Yes, Bircher, you did. That was perfect.
Excellent. All right,
Thanks,
so we've been talking just about the importance of weather forecasting in these type of events. What I wanted to know is what percentage of your business is actually outdoor events?
Absolutely. So in Arizona, we are, 7 months out of the year, it's about nearly perfect weather. So about 65% of our events are completely outdoors or partially outdoors. So, taking advantage of that nice weather 7 months out of the year and utilizing the desert as much as possible. People love to have their dinner parties, cocktail hours overlooking the beautiful desert sunset. Arizona sunsets are unbelievable. So a majority of our events we service are actually going to be outdoors.
And if there is bad weather in the forecast, how is this communicated? Do you go to the client and say, hey, we're not so sure if this is a good idea or we may want to move this, or how does that process get started?
Absolutely. So we are contingency plans are part of our daily process. So from day one, we're communicating with our clients about the backup plans for rain, extreme heat, wind, things of that nature. So, planning an event such as a wedding, you have a little bit more flexibility. The guest counts are smaller. So moving an event indoors or under a tent, procuring that is a little bit easier than some of the larger scale events that we do, such as the Phoenix Open, Innings Festival, concerts down in Tempe. Where you're responsible for, planning and servicing hundreds of thousands of guests in some cases. So, there's a little bit less flexibility in those situations. So having a good plan from the start for weather, such as rain, wind, all of the things is one of our big things that we focus on here at Culinary from day one.
And can you recall a specific time when maybe a storm did impact an event, like a haboob, a dust storm, or a crazy monsoon thunderstorm?
Yes, of course. So thankfully, a lot of our events, they avoid those summer months where the big monsoons happen. But specifically, one event that I can think of where weather was a big issue for us. Think back to WM Phoenix Open 2024. That was the year of the rain. Historically, we have had beautiful weather in February. It's gorgeous. You have perfect temperatures. It's what everyone comes to Arizona for. And that year, oh my goodness, the rain, the hail, the wind was unexpected. Just from historical years prior to that, we've been so fortunate to have, gorgeous sunny days and cool temperatures. But that year specifically, we had endured, hailstorms, crazy wind. Our staff, was soaking wet through all of the, transitions to meal periods. But that's one that comes to mind where weather was specifically impacting our services.
I was not working or living in Arizona yet, but I've heard many, many stories of that. And thankfully, that has not happened, at least the past couple years.
Absolutely.
When you talk about weather impacting things, it's not just probably rain, hail, and snow. Sometimes heat is a factor, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here in Arizona, bad weather is different than other places. A lot of other places, they deal with, extreme rain, things like that. We're fortunate. A little rain never without lightning doesn't hurt us. It's part of our contingency plan and filling that in with the tents. But, really for wind and heat, extreme heat especially is something that, people from out of state don't expect to see when they come here to Arizona. They think 80 degrees, it's going to be gorgeous, but really that dry air, the heat, that 80 degrees in the middle of the day in Arizona is really going to sneak up on you. So, heat-related illness is a huge issue. Also from a food and beverage perspective, the extreme heat, obviously impacts our food safety, our, temperature holding for cold items that might be, exposed to the weather, and then also beverage consumption as well. The warmer it is, the more people are going to be drinking water and all sorts of beverages. So really the heat here in Arizona is one of the largest, bad weather considerations for us.
in addition to watching every single forecast of every hour of the day from the First Alert Weather team here at Arizona's Family, in addition to that, do you have a separate team of meteorologists? Do you actually hire consultants or people to help work with you on the forecast?
Not internally. We will work alongside the event producers to, to coordinate and just keep track of the weather, and always deferring to them on the guest safety and our staff safety as well. But internally, we do implement, safety protocols, obviously underneath a tent structure where our team is cooking with open flame and ovens and fryers and things of that nature. We'll keep an eye out for the heat and ensure that we have, portable cooling units inside for our staff. But, we don't work directly with meteorologists. We'll refer to the event producer for those things.
So what you're saying is if the forecast goes wrong, you could just blame the meteorologist. Like, hey, this team messed up. It wasn't us, right?
No, not necessarily. That's where that contingency comes into play. So we're always planning, but, leaning on major event decisions, obviously moving the event indoors or, postponing in some cases, we'll always refer to those event producers for those big decisions.
And, I mentioned heat, and I think you mentioned this, here in Arizona, sometimes the nights can get a little bit chilly. So do you have to think about like the positioning of heat lamps or how things like that are set up?
Absolutely. Especially with the desert, we have early morning chill and then midday heat. So in the mornings, especially arriving for those longer day events, Phoenix Open and some of those larger scale events that we service, where we're arriving on site at 6 a.m. and we're servicing all the way through the next time that the sun goes down, making adjustments for the morning time, heat lamps, chafers, all of that stuff. Ensuring that we're holding food at the top temperatures. And then also during the day, if things are in the direct sun, that heat is going to impact, the cold food temperature. So providing shade and, getting fans and things like that whenever necessary.
Yeah, I imagine maybe the type of food does matter, right? If you got like the tuna fish sandwich out there, you might have to pay more attention to that than an old slice of pizza, right?
Absolutely. 100-degree day at an outdoor event, we are not serving sorbet because that is going to melt the second it walks out of the kitchen. So those considerations are absolutely made when we are looking at, seasonality, not only for the products that we're serving and the food items that we're putting into these things, but how is it going to hold in the weather and what's the season typically like? And, there's nothing better than a nice warm cup of chili or soup on a cold day, and something refreshing, like a sorbet on a hot day. But considering how all of those items will hold in the weather that we're serving it in is also a key part of our planning.
Well said, Lauren. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Sonoran Sky Live. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
All right, and that is it for this edition of Sonoran Sky Live. We'll see you next week. We've got all kinds of cool weather topics ahead, but I hope you've enjoyed learning about the importance of weather forecasting during outdoor events, especially when many people are involved and the costs could not be higher. We'll see you next time.